television interview spirals completely out of control, when a guest crosses every line imaginable and refuses to back down. It only took one comment about respect to turn a simple promotional appearance into the most shocking television moment of the year. Good Morning America's studio felt different that morning. The energy was tense. George Stephanopoulos sat across from Prince Harry, ready to discuss the latest royal activities and upcoming charitable initiatives. The cameras rolled. The lights were bright. Everything seemed normal at first. George started with a simple question. Thank you for joining us this morning. I wanted to begin by asking about your recent work with veteran organizations. Can you tell our viewers what inspired this particular project? Harry shifted in his seat. His jaw was tight. Well, George, I think what inspired it is something you wouldn't understand. Not everyone has lived the life I've lived. George kept his professional composure. His smile remained warm. Of course, I'm just hoping you can share that perspective with our audience this morning. Your audience, Harry said, leaning back. Right, the American audience. The people who think they know everything about my family because they read tabloids. The tension in the studio grew thicker. Crew members exchanged glances. George maintained his calm demeanor. Actually, that's exactly why we wanted to have you here, to share your authentic voice and your truth. So please, tell us about the Veterans Program. Harry waved his hand dismissively. I'll get to it when I'm ready, George. You know, the problem with American media is that you're all so obsessed with sound bites and quick answers. You don't actually care about the depth of anything. George's expression remained neutral, but his eyes showed a flicker of concern. I assure you, we have plenty of time for you to explain your work in depth. Our viewers are genuinely interested. Are they, though? Harry interrupted. Or are they just interested in gossip, in drama? That's what your show thrives on, isn't it? Manufacturing controversy? The host took a measured breath. With respect, this show has been delivering news and meaningful conversations for decades. We invited you here to discuss your charitable work, which I think is genuinely important. Harry laughed, but it wasn't friendly. With respect. You keep saying that phrase. Do you know what real respect looks like, George? It's not what you're showing right now. George leaned forward slightly. His voice remained steady and professional. I'm not sure I understand what you mean. I've been nothing but courteous since you arrived. Courteous? Harry repeated mockingly. That's a nice word for it. You sit there with your prepared questions, your scripted responses, thinking you're having a real conversation. But you're not. You're just another puppet reading from a teleprompter. The studio fell completely silent. Producers in the control room froze. This was unprecedented. George's co-hosts looked stunned, but George himself remained composed. I can understand if you're feeling defensive about certain topics, George said carefully. But I think you might be projecting frustrations that don't really have anything to do with this interview. Harry's face reddened. Projecting? Now you're psychoanalyzing me? That's rich coming from someone who spent years as a political spin doctor before playing journalist on television. George's professionalism never wavered. My background is public knowledge, and I'm proud of my career, but we're here to talk about you and your work. So I'm going to ask again, can you tell us about the Veterans Initiative? Stop trying to control this conversation, Harry snapped. That's what people like you do. You control the narrative. You decide what gets discussed and what doesn't. You think you have power because you sit in that chair. George remained remarkably calm. I'm simply trying to keep us on topic. You agreed to come here to discuss your charitable work. That's what our viewers tuned in to hear about. Harry stood up slightly, though he didn't leave his seat yet. Your viewers, your show, your rules. Everything is about what you want, isn't it, George? Has anyone ever told you how condescending you sound? The host's voice stayed level. I'm sorry you feel that way, but I have to point out that you're the guest here, and these comments are becoming inappropriate. Inappropriate? Harry's voice rose. You want to talk about inappropriate? Let's talk about how you ambush people with questions they weren't prepared for. Let's talk about how you twist words to create headlines. George shook his head slowly. That's not what's happening here. Every topic we planned to discuss was approved by your team in advance. And you knew exactly what this interview would cover. My team, Harry said with disdain. Always someone else's fault, right? Maybe your researchers didn't do their homework. Maybe you don't actually know how to conduct an interview with someone of my stature. The phrase hung in the air. Someone of my stature. Even the camera operators looked uncomfortable. George's expression finally showed a hint of disbelief. I've interviewed presidents, world leaders, and countless public figures, George said quietly. I treat every guest with the same respect and professionalism, including you. Harry leaned forward aggressively. Don't compare me to your other guests. I'm not some politician trying to sell a book or some celebrity promoting a movie. I'm royalty, George. Do you understand what that means? George's voice remained steady but firm. In this studio, you're a guest who came to discuss charitable work. That's all. And right now, you're being disrespectful, not just to me, but to everyone working here and everyone watching at home. Disrespectful, Harry laughed bitterly. You have no idea what disrespect actually looks like. You sit in your comfortable chair, in your comfortable studio, with your comfortable life, and you judge people. You judge me. But what have you actually done? What have you actually sacrificed? The host's patience was clearly being tested, but his composure held. This isn't about me. This was supposed to be about your work, your message, your causes. But you've chosen to turn it into something else entirely. Harry's voice dripped with sarcasm. Oh, poor George. Did the guest not stick to your script? Did someone not play along with your carefully crafted segment? Maybe you're just not as good at this job as you think you are. George sat back in his chair. His face showed disappointment rather than anger. I've tried to give you every opportunity to share your message. I've been patient. I've been respectful. But this has gone beyond a difficult interview. This has become hostile. Hostile? Harry shot back. You think this is hostile? This is me being honest. This is me not playing your games. Maybe you're just not used to someone who doesn't need you or your platform. Then why did you agree to come here? George asked simply. The question seemed to catch Harry off guard for a moment. His face twisted. Because my team said it would be good publicity. Because apparently, I'm supposed to care what Americans think. Because I'm supposed to smile and nod and pretend that people like you are important. George's expression hardened slightly. People like me. You keep saying that. I'm not sure what you mean, but I think our viewers are getting a very clear picture of what's happening here. Harry stood up fully now, his microphone still attached. A clear picture? You want to give them a clear picture? Here's the picture. Your show doesn't matter. You don't matter. This whole charade of morning television doesn't matter. You're all just noise. The host remained seated, looking up at his standing guest. I think you should sit down. We can end this interview early if you'd like, but let's do it professionally. Professionally? Harry scoffed. There's that word again. You know what's not professional. George? Wasting my time. Having me come all the way here for this pathetic excuse for journalism. You're a joke. This show is a joke. George's voice became firmer. That's enough. You need to stop now. I'll stop when I'm ready to stop, Harry fired back. Who do you think you are to tell me what to do? You're nobody, George. You're just another face on television that people forget about the moment they change the channel. The studio crew looked at each other nervously. This had crossed every line. George stood up now too, matching Harry's stance. His voice remained controlled, but had an edge to it. I've been patient. I've been respectful. But you've insulted me. You've insulted my colleagues. And you've insulted this program. I think it's time for you to leave. Harry's eyes widened. Excuse me? Are you asking me to leave? I'm telling you to leave, George said calmly. This interview is over. You're not welcome to continue behaving this way on our show. Harry laughed loudly, mockingly. You can't kick me out. Do you know who I am? George nodded slowly. I know exactly who you are. You're a guest who has completely disrespected everyone here. And yes, I can ask you to leave. This is our studio. This is unbelievable, Harry said, his voice rising even higher. You invite me here, and then you have the audacity to throw me out? This is going to be everywhere. Everyone is going to hear about how George Stephanopoulos treated me. The host crossed his arms. I'm comfortable with people knowing that I stood up to someone who was being abusive and disrespectful. Yeah, I think most people will understand. Harry pointed his finger at George. You're making a huge mistake. Do you understand the position I hold? The influence I have? I could destroy your career with one phone call. George's expression didn't change. Is that a threat? It's a promise, Harry said coldly. The host shook his head. Then I guess we'll see what happens. But right now, you need to remove your microphone and leave the set. We have a show to continue. Harry ripped off his microphone, yanking the wire. You're going to regret this, George. You and your little show are going to regret treating me this way. I don't think so, George replied quietly. I think I'm going to remember this as the day I stood up for my team and our viewers. Security will show you out. Harry looked around wildly as two security personnel approached from off-camera. This is absurd. You can't be serious. You're really doing this? George nodded. I am. Goodbye. You're pathetic, Harry spat. All of you. This entire country is pathetic. You worship celebrities, but you have no idea what real class looks like, what real importance looks like. The security team gently guided Harry toward the studio exit. He continued shouting as he moved. This is censorship! You're silencing me because I told the truth, because I called out your fake journalism. George turned to the camera, his expression calm and professional once again. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue with our planned programming. Harry's voice could still be heard in the background, getting fainter. You'll pay for this! All of you! This isn't over! The studio doors closed. The set fell silent except for the normal sounds of a television production. George sat back down in his chair, taking a deep breath. His co-hosts looked at him with expressions of support and disbelief. Are you okay? One of them asked quietly. George nodded. I'm fine. That was unfortunate, but necessary. A producer's voice came through his earpiece. The crew began resetting for the next segment. George straightened his papers and checked his appearance. Within seconds, his professional demeanor was completely restored. The commercial break ended. The show continued. George addressed the audience directly, his voice steady and measured. Welcome back. As you just witnessed, our interview with our scheduled guest ended abruptly. We always strive to have respectful and meaningful conversations on this program, but sometimes circumstances don't allow that to happen. We appreciate your understanding. He moved seamlessly into the next segment, as if nothing had happened. His professionalism was absolute. The show went on. The other planned stories were covered. Everything returned to normal. But in that studio, everyone knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. A guest had completely melted down on live television. A host had maintained his dignity and composure throughout an unprecedented attack. Lines had been crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. George had handled it with grace. He had given chance after chance for the conversation to return to normal. He had remained calm when insults were thrown at him, but he had protected his team and his program when things went too far. The interview that was supposed to be about charitable work and positive initiatives had become something else entirely. It had revealed character in ways that no prepared segment ever could. One person had shown restraint, professionalism, and strength. The other had shown arrogance, disrespect, and an inability to control his emotions. Every word had been captured, every moment recorded. The footage would speak for itself. The contrast between the two men couldn't have been clearer. One represented grace under pressure. The other represented entitlement and rage. George never raised his voice. He never matched the hostility directed at him. He simply stood firm on basic principles of respect and decency. When those boundaries were violated beyond repair, he made a decision and stood by it. The audience at home had watched it all unfold in real time. They had seen someone claim superiority while demonstrating nothing worthy of respect. They had seen someone maintain dignity while being personally attacked. They had witnessed a masterclass in how to handle an impossible situation. As the show continued, George's focus never wavered. He interviewed other guests with the same warmth and professionalism he had attempted to show earlier. He laughed at appropriate moments. He asked thoughtful questions. He did his job exactly as he always had. The contrast was stark. This was someone who understood that the show was bigger than any one moment, that the audience deserved better than drama for drama's sake, that professionalism meant maintaining standards even when others abandoned theirs. In the control room, producers were already dealing with the aftermath. Phone calls were being made. Statements were being prepared. But on the air, George continued, as if this was just another day. Because in many ways, it was. Difficult guests were part of the job. Handling them with grace was what separated good broadcasters from great ones. The other co-hosts supported him completely. Their questions and comments showed solidarity without belaboring the point. They acknowledged what happened and moved forward. The show's rhythm never broke. George's experience showed through in every moment following the confrontation. He knew that dwelling on it would only give it more power. He knew that the best response was to demonstrate exactly the kind of professionalism that had been lacking from his guest. Throughout the rest of the morning, viewers saw a host who was unshaken, who remained kind to his other guests, who treated his crew with respect, who did everything that his departed guest had failed to do. The message was clear without being stated. This was how you behaved in professional settings. This was how you treated people. This was what real class looked like. Not in titles or claims of importance, but in actions and choices when things got difficult. George had been tested in front of millions of people. He had faced personal attacks, professional criticism, and outright hostility. And he had passed that test with flying colors. Not by fighting back, but by maintaining standards. Not by escalating, but by setting boundaries. Not by seeking drama, but by pursuing dignity. The show ended at its normal time. George signed off with his usual warmth. He thanked the viewers. He promoted the next day's segments. He smiled genuinely. And then the cameras stopped rolling. Behind the scenes, the team gathered. There were hugs. There were reassurances. There was recognition that something significant had happened. But there was also pride. Pride in how it had been handled. Pride in standing up for what was right. Pride in not backing down when challenged. George spoke to his team quietly. He thanked them for their support. He acknowledged how difficult the situation had been. He made it clear that he stood behind every decision he had made, and he prepared to move forward. Because that's what professionals do. They face the difficult moments. They make the hard choices. They maintain their standards. And then they continue doing their jobs with the same commitment and excellence they always have. The interview that never finished had revealed everything anyone needed to know. One person had claimed importance while acting unimportant. One person had held actual power while wielding it responsibly. One person had demanded respect while showing none. One person had earned respect by giving it freely. The cameras had captured it all. The microphones had recorded every word. The truth was preserved in video form, undeniable and complete. There would be no debate about what happened or who was at fault. The evidence was absolute. George had faced a nightmare scenario for any broadcaster. A guest who wouldn't cooperate, who became hostile, who made the entire situation uncomfortable. And he had navigated it with a steady hand and clear principles. He had tried patience first, then firmness, then direct requests, and finally, when all else failed, he had made the decision to end it. Not because he wanted to create drama, but because he refused to enable behavior that was harmful to everyone involved. The studio cleared slowly. Equipment was put away. Lights were turned off. The set returned to its empty state. But the memory of what happened there would remain. A line had been drawn. A stand had been taken. A message had been sent. In living rooms and offices across the country, people had watched it unfold. They had formed their own opinions. They had seen the contrast between two different approaches to the same situation. And most of them recognized which approach deserved respect. George went about the rest of his day. He had other responsibilities, other meetings, other segments to plan. The work never stopped. One dramatic moment didn't change the fundamental job that needed to be done. His reputation had been built over decades of solid work, of fair interviews, of tough questions asked with respect, of treating every subject as important. One difficult guest couldn't undo all of that. If anything, his handling of the situation reinforced everything people already knew about him. He was someone who could be trusted to do the right thing, to maintain standards, to protect his team, to serve his audience, to stand up when necessary, to remain calm under pressure, to choose dignity over drama. The incident would be discussed. It would be analyzed. It would be replayed. But ultimately, it would be understood for what it was. A moment where someone showed their true character under stress, and that character was found to be solid. George had proven that class wasn't about titles or positions. It was about behavior, about choices, about how you treated other people, about maintaining your principles when they were tested, about knowing where the lines were and being willing to defend them. The morning had started normally. It had veered into chaos, and it had ended with a demonstration of what real professionalism looked like. Not perfect, perhaps, but honest, principled, firm when needed, and always respectful of the work and the audience. That was the story. Not of a host who kicked someone off his show because he wanted to, but of a host who made a difficult decision because he had to. Who chose standards over convenience? Who protected his program's integrity? Who showed that some behaviors simply wouldn't be tolerated, regardless of who was engaging in them? And in doing so, he had given a lesson that extended far beyond one morning's show segment, about dignity, about respect, about standing up for what's right, about not being bullied or intimidated, about maintaining your values when they're challenged, about knowing your worth and insisting that others recognize it too. The cameras had stopped rolling. The show had ended. But the impact of those 33 seconds when everything changed would last much longer. Because people remember moments of genuine character. They remember when someone stands up. They remember when